Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle and this is a reading roundup. In my reading roundup videos, I tell you about the books that I have been reading recently, and I have got a stack of 7 books here to talk about, so let's just dive straight in. The first book that I read was Die Again by Tess Gerritsen. This is from her Rizzoli and Isles series. This is a police procedural series set in Boston in the United States, and I quite enjoy this series. This one was an interesting outing in the series. We get perspectives from, and I've just forgotten her name. A woman who is on a trip, a safari in Africa with her boyfriend Richard. There's a small group of them, and it is hardcore. They sleep in tents. There's no bathrooms. They have to cook their food over the fire. That kind of thing. And so we get it first person perspective from her, and then the action moves between that, which had happened 6 years previously, to current day Boston and the case that Rizzoli is investigating. At the crime scene, they have a man who is found hanging upside down in his house, and he has been killed. And it appears that he's been hung like an animal would be hung after it's been hunted. And so, it's an unusual case. The man himself is a taxidermist, and they're all over his house is, proof of his job. He's got animals hanging all over his house. And so, yeah, this one was an interesting one in the series, like I said. This group of tourists that we get the first person perspective from, things do not go very well on that trip, and so through the whole book you're trying to figure out what the connection is between what happened then to what happened with the case that they are currently investigating. And so it was very entertaining. And then I read the next up in my Elizabeth I series that I'm reading for my personal reading challenge. These are the books that I read when I'm at chemo, and so I read The Queen's Cure by Harper. This one was really interesting. It's 1562, and Elizabeth goes with kind of her entourage to London's Royal College of Physicians. She wants to know why they aren't doing more to help with the disease and pestilence that seems to be overtaking the city. For example, smallpox. So she wants to know why they aren't doing more to help. But then when she's leaving and going back to her coach, she finds an almost life-size effigy of herself in the coach. And what makes it shocking is that the effigy has been given the markings of smallpox. And so she takes that as a death threat, or as, it's alarming anyway. It looks like someone is hoping that she will get smallpox. And then, more things happen, and there's a murder, and so of course her Privy Plot Council, they need to do some investigating. It was really good. I really did enjoy it. And I keep forgetting to mention these, so I marked it this time. At the beginning of each book in this series, she has Elizabeth I, the young queen, and she has stuff that happened during her reign by date. So 1518, or that are pertinent to this particular story. So 1518, London Royal College of Physicians is founded. Or 1547, Henry VIII dies and Edward VI is crowned. Or 1559, Elizabeth crowned in Westminster Abbey. So that kind of thing, you know, really helpful if you're looking for some historical context. There is also a family tree, which is also helpful. Tudor family, friends, and foes. Yeah, that's really good. And then there's also a good map. So if you're into that kind of stuff at the beginning of your books, this could be the series for you. This is a map of the city of London circa 1550. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I really enjoyed the stuff about the Royal College of Physicians and how they understood sickness and disease at the time period. Yeah, so that was really good. And then I've got a few books here that I read for the Nightingale August Challenge that's put on by my friend Ahona from Hamzavahini Vuchu Astra. Sorry, I butchered your channel's name. So I read the Miss Nightingale's Nurses by Kate Eastham. This was for the prompt of reading a fiction from that time. And this one was interesting. This one was set in Liverpool and then over in the Crimea. So it is 1855. Although we get a little bit earlier than that first, but the bulk of the story happens in 1855. The main character is Ada Houston, and she lives with her brother and her grandfather. And one day her brother goes missing after an accident at the docks. He works at the docks, and there's an accident and he goes missing, and her life is kind of blown apart. So anyway, she discovers that there is a chance that he has gone to fight in the war in the Crimea. And so she decides to go over there and join Miss Nightingale's nurses. And so you got a lot of really good background or, you know, what it was like for the nurses over there. So she starts at Scutari, the hospital where Florence Nightingale is, but then she gets sent to the front lines to Balaclava. And so we do get a teeny little bit of Florence Nightingale in this story. We also get a bit of Mary Seacole. She meets Mary Seacole, which was interesting. So yes, this was a pretty good story. I did enjoy it, and I did really enjoy all of the history, the information about what it was like for nurses during the Crimean War. And then I read Sisters by Barbara Mortimer, heroic true life stories from the nurses of World War II. This one was really, really interesting, and I will tell you why. The Royal College of Nursing Archives Oral History Collection numbers almost 1,000 interviews recording the lives of nurses from the First World War to the present day. And so everything in this book is taken from that oral archive. And so it is fascinating. You just get little snippets of what these nurses remember about nursing during World War II. And it was fascinating. I really enjoyed, you know, kind of hearing their individual voices as they told their stories and remembered various things. Liked this poster. They included this here. Make nursing your war job. It's war work with a future. So it has chapters on nursing in 1939, War Clouds Gather, Refugees and Nurses, Dunkirk to the Blitz, the Home Front, Nursing with the Military, Wounded Body, Wounded Mind, Nearing the End, Occupied by the Enemy. That one was really interesting. That one was about the Channel Islands, Guernsey and Jersey in particular. That one was a really interesting chapter. And then beginning again following the war and with the start of the NHS. I did mark a couple of things. So this is the account of Mary Copland in 1944. So she was transferred to Normandy on D-Day +12, and she ended up in several army hospitals around Bayeux, and she was with she was with the group of nurses that had to deal with the horrors that they found in Belsen in the concentration camps. So yeah, and we went into Belsen, I suppose about 10 days after it opened, and it was absolutely horrendous. I have a letter here that I wrote to my sister at the time. We were all told to write to as many people as friends and relations to tell them all about the horrors of it. And this is my letter written to my sister on 13th May 1945. Perhaps you know where I am. If not, let me enlighten you. The place I am in is none other than Belsen. We have been here almost 3 weeks, just 10 days after this ghastly place was taken. I cannot begin to describe to you the horror and degradation of this concentration camp, but you will have read about it. Please believe everything that is printed and tell anyone doubting the newspapers or the information which is released that the accounts and stories of the place are absolutely true. Oh, yeah. All right. And then this is an account from Sheena Kilminster in 1945. Assigned to work in the plastic surgery unit at Halton for the whole of her service, she was well positioned to enjoy VE Day. And so I just thought this was really cute. So she had gone with a couple other people, you know, they kind of went on a pub crawl, but they did it by boat down the Thames. And she said, anyhow, we ended up at I think it was called the White Swan at Thames Ditton, and that really was enough, and I was just sleeping on my feet, as you can imagine. Anyway, we had lost the rest of the company somewhere en route, and Ian, being a complete gentleman, my husband, I think, is never very sure how I behaved that night, but I can assure you my behavior was impeccable. I just simply passed out like a light, and Ian tucked me up with a rug on one bunk, and he slept on the other. That was cute. All right, and then, oh yeah, I wanted to show this. Is a picture of, after the conflict, reflection and mourning led to respect and gratitude toward wartime nurses. Some local memorials were constructed and a nurses' chapel consecrated in Westminster Abbey. So it says 1939 to 1945. Praise God, remembering those nurses from this hospital who gave their lives for their country. So then at the very, very end, it says, and so this would have been the editor, Barbara Mortimer, who put this together. She says, Agnes Barnett's diffidence was typical of her generation and of her profession. There were countless ordinary people from all walks of life who worked tirelessly and performed extraordinary acts of endurance and courage throughout the war. But nurses have been one of the great overlooked groups. Their contribution to both the British war effort and the rebuilding of the nation in the aftermath of victory was invaluable. The women and men who were interviewed for this project, whose voices still resonate across the years, are the very definition of heroes. We owe them an enormous debt of gratitude. So that's Sisters by Barbara Mortimer. And then finally for the Nightingale August Challenge, I read Letters from Egypt by Florence Nightingale, a journey on the Nile from 1849 to 1850. This one was really interesting. Now, it's just her letters home, so it did get a bit much after a while, so I skimmed a little bit of it. But just to get this idea of what it was like for her to visit Egypt and her impressions of it, was really interesting. So, for example, here is a letter that she wrote. She's at Cairo. This is November 29th. My dearest people, and that's how she always started her letters. No one ever talks about the beauty of Cairo, ever gives you the least idea of this surpassing city. I thought it was a place to buy stores at and pass through on one's way to India, instead of its being the rose of cities, the garden of the desert, the pearl of Moorish architecture, the fairest place of earth below. And then I also just marked some of the pictures were fantastic. So this is Tombs of the Caliphs by Alexis Gayer. And another one. This is An Evening Drink by Charles Theodore Frere. So what I liked was that they chose pictures that were done, that were painted around the same time period, which I think is cool. This is The Fairy by Charles Theodore Frere. And that is On the Nile by Prosper Rinehart. Okay, and then just two more. This is The Temple of Philo by David Roberts. And then I think one thing that I love so much about these is the color. The colors in them are fantastic. And that is Twilight Scene on the River by Charles Theodore Frere. So that was an interesting read to read these letters that Florence Nightingale wrote home on her trip to Egypt. Okay, and then for Kate Howe's Summer of Suspense, the third book that we read was The Window at the White Cat by Mary Roberts Rinehart. This was an interesting read because I've not read very much Mary Roberts Rinehart, but I'm intrigued. And she's a very early American detective writer, and her books have intrigued me for a long time, and I actually have a pretty big collection of them, but I haven't read very many. So when Kate put this as one of the options, I was intrigued. So The Window at the White Cat was written in 1910, and that makes it a very interesting detective story. I kept forgetting how early it was as I read this, and so I kept reading it expecting it to be a fair play mystery, and finding myself frustrated when I wasn't given all of the information that the detective was given, because I was hoping to try and solve it myself. But it's not that kind of mystery. It's too early for a fair play mystery. So we have an attorney named Jack Knox, and he narrates the story in the first person. And a woman named Marjorie Fleming comes to him to tell him that her father is missing. Her father is the state treasurer, I believe. And that was one of my problems with this book, was that it was pretty political, and I find political stuff goes over my head or it's a tad boring. So that was unfortunate, but the mystery itself was pretty good in here. So he goes missing, and so she goes to stay with two of her aunts, Aunt Jane and Aunt Letitia, and they were fantastic. And while she's staying there, her aunt goes missing, and then her father is found, and he has been found shot at the White Cat, which is a club, a political club. He's been found shot there, and so Jack continues to investigate to help Marjorie. It was very complex. The characters were great. I didn't love all of the political stuff, and I did have a few questions, but ultimately this was a really enjoyable mystery, and I will definitely be reading more from Mary Roberts Rinehart. And then last but not least is A Tale of Two Biddies by Kylie Logan. This is the second in her League of Literary Ladies series. This is a series that is set on an island on Lake Erie. So it is in the state of Ohio. It's a small island. It's only like 4 miles long, and it's got one town on it, and that's where this series is set. The League of Literary Ladies are very entertaining. There's 4 of them, and in this book they are getting ready to celebrate Bastille Day. They've got a big a big celebration. So it's an island. The town is very small, but they get a huge amount of tourists. And so one thing that they've done to bring in more tourists is to have this Bastille Day. And so they've brought in a band called Guillotine, and they're doing, you know, Charles Dickens impersonators and quizzes and just all kinds of stuff. There's a man who lives on the island, and he is found dead in the bar. And of course, the League of Literary Ladies has to investigate. We meet two great characters. They're women. They are twins who run the knitting store on the island, and of course their last name is Defarge, Margaret and Alice Defarge. And of course that's a connection to A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. So yeah, this was just a fun cozy mystery. I will say that I liked the first book in the series better, but this one was still quite a fun, cozy, and I'm going to read the third one for series September. So there it is. There you have it. That's what I've been reading recently. Have you read any of these books? I would love to chat with you about them in the comment section down below, and I will see you for another video soon. Bye.